So it was my weekly piano lesson at the Juilliard School, where I dreamed of studying since I started playing piano at the age of 5, practicing 4 or 5 hours a day for 11 years. And my teacher, my world-renowned teacher, says to me, "You play like a mouse." I looked at him to see if he was joking, and he wasn't. And I still remember how deflated I felt. Growing up, I had often been told how quiet I was. And it was discouraging to me because I felt all this passion and emotion inside of me, and clearly it wasn't transmitting. So fast forward 4 years, and I am not pursuing a career in music for various reasons. And I'm living and working in Japan. Common theme tonight. And I decided to enter a competition, a speech competition, in Japanese for foreigners living in Japan. And I was very passionate about the environment at that point, so I decided to do my speech about that. And I prepared, I worked on my pronunciation, my grammar, I practiced hours and hours by myself and with anyone who would listen to me. And I sent off my recording and was thrilled to find out that I'd made it to the finals, which would take place in Tokyo in front of a live audience. So on the day of the event, I showed up at the auditorium and was surprised to find it was packed, and there were TV cameras all around the stage. The event was going to be broadcast by NHK, which is basically the NPR of Japan. So I got up on stage and I delivered my speech with what I thought was great feeling and enthusiasm. And I actually thought I had a pretty good chance of winning the competition, or at least getting a prize. But I didn't win. And a few days later, a Japanese friend said to me, she had seen the broadcast, "You were so quiet." I was like, oh, I was so confused and discouraged. Why was I holding back? Why couldn't I let out my power? So fast forward again, several years, I'm back in the US, and it's the day of my Taekwondo black belt test. And a black belt test, as you probably know, is a rigorous show of stamina. And at my school, it was over an hour of kicks, jumps, forms, push-ups, sparring with black belts. And in order to get your black belts, we had to do a board break. We had to break 5 boards taped together, held by 5 or 6 students. And it didn't matter how well you had done in the rest of the test, if you didn't break the boards, you wouldn't get your black belt. So when it was my turn, I faced the boards, I turned, I kicked, and I heard the dull thud of my heel hit the boards. I tried again 3, 4 times, and finally I had to leave the mat in embarrassment. Now it's important to understand that we were only allowed to come back and try the board break again every 3 months. So I went off and I practiced. I worked on my technique. I threw hundreds of back kicks on the heavy bag. And 3 months later, I came back to try again. I faced the boards. I turned, I kicked, and again, I heard the dull thud of my heel hit the boards. This time, the sabunim, one of the master instructors, called me in to his office, and he said, "Renita, you have to let out your power." And I looked at him and I nodded, and waiting for him to tell me how to do that, but all he said was, "Just let it out." So over the next 6 months, I came back 2 more times, and 2 more times, I didn't break the boards. It was like a wet sponge could have hit the boards with more power. And I felt like everyone in the dojang was looking at me as a little red belt who couldn't. So finally, one of the other master instructors took me aside and he said, "Come by after the school closes." And when I showed up, he took out 4 boards. And when I saw that he was going to single-handedly hold the boards for me, what normally took 4 or 5 people to do, something inside of me clicked. And I faced the boards, and without hesitation, I turned and I broke the 4 boards. Now I only had to break 5 boards in front of the whole school. So that Saturday, I showed up at the dojang, and if you're keeping track, this is my 4th formal try at the board break. And as usual, the whole school gathered round to watch, and I faced the boards. I took a deep breath. I turned, I kicked, and I heard the nice, clean crack of the boards as they broke and fell to the ground. I had done it. I had accessed my full power. And in that moment, I felt so alive and so invigorated. My whole body was buzzing. And ever since that day, I've never doubted my true power. Except that's not true. What I've learned instead is that the doubt comes back. Every time we look to expand, we come up against our fears and our perceived limitations. And our power is always inside of us, waiting. And it's not about perfect technique. It's not about not making mistakes. It's not even about turning up the volume. It is about training, though, or actually retraining our minds. Because most of our lives, we're training to be limited. As the great spiritual teacher Marianne Williamson says, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And so what I do now as a performance coach is I work with people who want to have a powerful impact, entrepreneurs, athletes, even Navy SEAL candidates. And I help them become the greatest expression of themselves. And so if you're wondering, how do I do that? I'll share one quick tip, and that is to forget what you know, what you think you know, what people are always saying, what society wants you to believe, and ask yourself, what if? What if I didn't know my gender or my age? What would I attempt? What would I do differently? I often say to the candidates, the SEAL candidates, what if you didn't know how many pull-ups you could do or how fast you could run? Because being unlimited is our natural state. Our power is always there inside of us, waiting patiently. All we have to do is train to get out of the way. Thank you.